The San Ysidro McDonald's massacre was an act of mass murder that occurred at a McDonald's restaurant in the San Ysidro neighborhood of San Diego, California. The perpetrator, 41-year-old James Huberty, fatally shot 21 people and wounded 19 others before being killed by a police sniper approximately 77 minutes after he had first opened fire. Prior to the incident on July 15, 1984, James Huberty commented to his wife, Etna, that he suspected he had a mental problem. 2 days later, on the morning of July 17, he called a San Diego mental health clinic, requesting an appointment. Leaving his contact details with the receptionist, Huberty was assured the clinic would return his call within hours. According to his wife, he sat quietly beside the telephone for several hours, awaiting the return call, before abruptly walking out of the family home and riding to an unknown destination on his motorcycle. The receptionist had actually misspelled his name as Huberty, and claimed that his polite demeanor conveyed no sense of urgency to the operator, and he had mentioned in the phone call that he had never been hospitalized for mental health issues. Therefore, the call had been logged as a non-crisis inquiry, to be handled within 48 hours. Approximately 1 hour later, Huberty returned home in a contented mood. After eating dinner, Huberty, his wife, and their 2 daughters, aged 12 and 10, rode their bikes to a nearby park. Later that evening, he and Etna watched a film together on their television. Wednesday, July 18, 1984, Huberty, his wife and children visited the San Diego Zoo. In the course of their walk through the zoo, Huberty told his wife of his belief that his life was effectively over. Referring to the mental health clinic's failure to return his phone call the previous day, he said, "Well, society had their chance." After eating lunch at a McDonald's restaurant in the Claremont neighborhood of San Diego, the Huberty family returned home. Shortly after, Huberty walked into his bedroom wearing a maroon t-shirt and green camouflage pants. He leaned toward Etna and said, "I want to kiss you goodbye." Etna kissed her husband, then asked him where he was going, and that she would be cooking dinner soon. Huberty calmly replied he was going hunting for humans, holding a gun across his shoulder and carrying a box of ammunition and a bundle wrapped in a checkered blanket. Huberty glanced toward his elder daughter, Zelia, as he walked toward the front door of the family home and said, "Goodbye. I won't be back." Huberty then drove down San Ysidro Boulevard. According to eyewitnesses, he drove first toward a Big Bear supermarket and then toward a U.S. Post Office branch, before entering the parking lot of a McDonald's restaurant approximately 200 yards from his Averill Road apartment. At approximately 3:56 p.m. Huberty drove his black Mercury Marca sedan into the parking lot of the McDonald's restaurant on San Ysidro Boulevard. In his possession were a 9mm Browning HP semi-automatic pistol, a 9mm Uzi carbine, a Winchester 1212 gauge pump-action shotgun, a box, and a cloth bag filled with hundreds of rounds of ammunition for each weapon. A total of 45 customers were present inside the restaurant. Huberty first aimed his shotgun at a 16-year-old employee named John Arnold. As he did so, the assistant manager, Guillermo Flores, shouted, "Hey, John, that guy's going to shoot you." According to John Arnold, when Huberty pulled the trigger, nothing happened. As Huberty inspected his gun, the manager of the restaurant, 22-year-old Neva Kane, walked toward the service counter of the restaurant in the direction of John Arnold, as John, believing the incident to be a distasteful joke, began to walk away from the gunman. Huberty fired his shotgun toward the ceiling before aiming the Uzi at Neva, shooting her once beneath her left eye. Neva Kane died minutes later. Immediately after shooting Neva Kane, Huberty fired his shotgun at John Arnold, wounding the teenager in the chest and arm, before shouting a comment to the effect of, "Everybody on the ground." Huberty then referred to all present in the restaurant as dirty swine, Vietnam assholes, before claiming that he had killed 1,000 and that he intended to kill 1,000 more. Upon hearing Huberty's profane rant and seeing Neva and John shot, one customer, 25-year-old Victor Rivera, tried to persuade Huberty not to shoot anyone else. In response, Huberty shot him 14 times, repeatedly shouting "Shut up" as Victor screamed in pain. As staff and customers tried to hide beneath tables and service booths, Huberty turned his attention toward 6 women and children huddled together. He first killed 19-year-old Maria Calmanero Silva with a single gunshot to the chest, then fatally shot 9-year-old Claudia Perez in the stomach, cheek, thigh, hip, leg, chest, back, armpit, and head with his Uzi. He then wounded Claudia's 15-year-old sister, Imelda, once in the hand with the same weapon and fired upon 11-year-old Aurora Pena with his shotgun. Aurora, initially wounded in the leg, had been shielded by her pregnant aunt, 18-year-old Jackie Reyes. Huberty shot Reyes 48 times with the Uzi. Beside his mother's body, 8-month-old Carlos Reyes sat up and wailed, whereupon Huberty shouted at the child, then killed the baby with a single pistol shot to the center of the back. Huberty then shot and killed a 62-year-old trucker named Lawrence Verslois, before targeting a family seated near the play area of the restaurant who had tried to shield their son and his friend beneath the tables with their bodies. 31-year-old Blythe Regan Herrera had shielded her 11-year-old son, Mateo, beneath one booth, as her husband, Ronald, protected Mateo's friend, 12-year-old Keith Thomas, beneath a booth directly across from them. Ronald Herrera urged Thomas not to move, shielding the boy with his body. Thomas was shot in the shoulder, arm, wrist, and left elbow, but was not seriously wounded. Ronald Herrera was shot 6 times in the stomach, chest, arm, hip, shoulder, and head but survived. His wife, Blythe, and son, Mateo, were both killed by numerous gunshots to the head. Nearby, 3 women had also attempted to hide beneath a booth. 24-year-old Guadalupe Del Rio lay against a wall. She was shielded by her friends, 25-year-old Gloria Ramirez, and 31-year-old Arisdelcy Vulvas Vargas. Guadalupe was hit several times but was not seriously wounded. Gloria was unhurt, whereas Arisdelcy Vargas received a single gunshot wound to the back of the head. She died of her wound the next day, the only person fatally wounded who lived long enough to reach a hospital. At another booth, Huberty killed 45-year-old banker Hugo Velazquez Vasquez with a single shot to the chest. The first of many calls to emergency services was made shortly after 4 p.m., notifying police of the shooting of a child who had been taken to a post office on San Ysidro Boulevard. The dispatcher mistakenly directed responding officers to another McDonald's 2 miles from the San Ysidro Boulevard restaurant. This error delayed the imposition of a lockdown by several minutes, and the only warnings to civilians walking, riding, or driving toward the restaurant were given by passers-by. Shortly after 4 o'clock, a young woman named Lydia Flores drove into the parking lot. Stopping at the food pickup window, Flores noticed shattered windows and the sound of gunfire. Before looking up, and there he was, just shooting. Flores reversed her car until she crashed into a fence. She hid in some bushes with her 2-year-old daughter until the shooting ended. At approximately 4:05 p.m., a Mexican couple, Astolfo and Maricela Felix, drove toward one of the service areas of the restaurant. Noting the shattered laminated glass, Astolfo initially assumed renovation work was in progress and that Huberty, striding toward the car, was a repairman. Huberty fired his shotgun and Uzi at the couple and their 4-month-old daughter, Carlita, striking Maricela in the face, arms, and chest, blinding her in one eye and permanently rendering one hand unusable. Her baby was critically wounded in the neck, chest, and abdomen. Astolfo was wounded in the chest and head. As Astolfo and Maricela staggered away from Huberty's line of fire, Maricela gave their baby to her husband. Astolfo handed his crying child to a young woman named Lucia Velasco, as his wife collapsed against a car. Lucia Velasco rushed the baby to a nearby hospital, as her husband assisted Astolfo and Maricela into a nearby building. All 3 members of the Felix family survived. 3 11-year-old boys then rode their bikes into the west parking lot to purchase sundaes. Hearing a member of the public yell something unintelligible from across the street, all 3 hesitated before Huberty shot the 3 boys with his shotgun and Uzi. Joshua Coleman fell to the ground critically wounded in the back, arm, and leg. He later recalled looking toward his 2 friends, Omar Alonso Hernandez and David Flores Delgado, noting that Omar Hernandez was on the ground with multiple gunshot wounds to his back and had started vomiting. David Delgado had received several gunshot wounds to his head. Coleman survived. Omar Hernandez and David Delgado both died at the scene.
At McDonald's, did you have any idea something was happening there?
No.
Did anyone yell at you or something?
Yeah, from across the street, a man yelled at us.
What'd you think?
I didn't understand what he was saying.
Yeah. Where were you hit?
All on my arm, and on my back, and right here.
When did you realize that your friends were dead?
My mom told me in the hospital.
What happened to your friends?
They died.
All 5?
No, 3 of them. 3 girls.
When nobody came to help you, what did you think about doing next?
Just laying there and wait.
Did you think of that by yourself?
Mm-hmm.
How come? Pretty smart. What do you think?
Huberty next noticed an elderly couple, 74-year-old Miguel Victoria Aloa, and 69-year-old Aida Velazquez Victoria, walking toward the entrance. As Miguel reached to open the door for his wife, Huberty fired his shotgun, killing Aida with a gunshot to the face and wounding Miguel. An uninjured survivor, Oscar Mondragon, later reported observing Miguel cradling his wife in his arms and wiping blood from her face, shouting curses at Huberty, who then approached the doorway, swore at Miguel, then killed him with a shot to the head. Approximately 10 minutes after the first call had been placed to emergency services, police arrived at the correct McDonald's restaurant. The first officer on the scene, Miguel Rosario, rapidly determined the location and cause of the actual disturbance and relayed this information to the San Diego Police Department as Huberty fired at Rosario's patrol car. Officers deployed immediately imposed a lockdown on an area spanning 6 blocks from the site of the shootings. The police established a command post 2 blocks from the restaurant and deployed 175 officers in numerous strategic locations. These officers were joined within the hour by several SWAT team members, who also took positions around the restaurant. As Huberty was firing rapidly and alternating between firearms, police initially were unaware how many individuals were inside the restaurant. Because most of the restaurant's windows had been shattered by gunfire, reflections from shards of glass provided an additional difficulty for police focusing inside the restaurant. Initially, police were concerned the gunman or gunman may be holding hostages, although one individual who had escaped from the restaurant informed police there was a single gunman present in the premises, holding no hostages and shooting any individual he encountered. At 5:05 p.m., all responding law enforcement personnel were authorized to kill the perpetrator should they obtain a clear shot. Several survivors later reported observing Huberty walk toward the service counter and adjust a portable radio, possibly to search for news reports of his shooting spree, before selecting a music station and further shooting individuals as he danced to the music. Shortly thereafter, Huberty searched the kitchen area, discovering 6 employees and shouting, "Oh, there's more. You're trying to hide from me." In response, one of the female employees screamed in Spanish, "Don't kill me. Don't kill me," before Huberty opened fire, killing 21-year-old Paulina Lopez, 19-year-old Elsa Borboa Fierro, and 18-year-old Margarita Padilla, and critically wounding 17-year-old Albert Leos. Immediately before Huberty had begun shooting, Margarita Padilla grabbed the hand of her friend and colleague, 17-year-old Wendy Flanagan, before the two began to run. Margarita Padilla was then fatally shot. Wendy Flanagan, 4 other employees and a female customer hid inside a basement utility room. They were later joined by Leos, who had crawled to the utility room after being shot 5 times. When a fire truck drove within range, Huberty opened fire and repeatedly pierced the vehicle with bullets, slightly wounding one occupant. Hearing a wounded teenager, 19-year-old Jose Perez, moaning, Huberty shot him in the head. The boy slumped dead in the booth. Jose Perez died alongside his friend and neighbor, 22-year-old Gloria Gonzalez, and a young woman named Michelle Carngris. At one point, Aurora Pena, who had laid wounded beside her dead aunt, baby cousin and 2 friends, noted that the firing got quiet. She began opening her eyes when she saw Huberty nearby, staring in her direction. He swore and threw a bag of French fries at Aurora Pena, then retrieved his shotgun and shot her in the arm, neck, and jaw. Aurora Pena survived, although she would remain hospitalized longer than any other survivors. At 5:17 p.m., Huberty walked from the service counter toward the doorway close to the drive-in window of the restaurant, affording a 27-year-old police SWAT sniper named Charles Foster, deployed to a strategic position on the roof of a post office directly opposite the restaurant. An unobstructed view of his body from the neck down through his telescopic sight, Foster fired a single round from a range of approximately 35 yards, 32 meters. The bullet entered Huberty's chest, severed his aorta just beneath his heart, and exited through his spine, leaving an exit wound 1 inch square and sending Huberty sprawling backwards onto the floor directly in front of the service counter, killing him almost instantly. Immediately after shooting Huberty, Foster relayed to other responding officers he had killed the perpetrator and that his focus remained on the motionless suspect. Nonetheless, as so many rounds had been expended from different firearms within the restaurant, police were not completely certain the sole perpetrator was deceased. Entering the restaurant approximately 1 minute later, a police sergeant focused his gun upon Huberty as he noted the movements of a wounded girl. When asked if the deceased male was the suspect, the girl nodded her head. The entire incident had lasted for 77 minutes, during which time Huberty fired a minimum of 257 rounds of ammunition, killing 20 people and wounding as many others, one of whom was pronounced brain dead upon arrival at hospital and died the following day. 17 of the victims were killed inside the restaurant and 4 in the immediate vicinity. Only 10 individuals inside the restaurant were uninjured, 6 of whom had hidden inside the basement utility room. Several victims had tried to stanch their own wounds and the wounds of their companions with napkins. Of the fatalities, 13 died from gunshot wounds to the head, 7 from gunshots to the chest, and 1 victim, 8-month-old Carlos Reyes, from a single 9mm gunshot to the back. Prior to shooting several of his victims, Huberty had shouted accusations or insults. On one occasion, he had also shouted that he himself did not deserve to live, but that he was taking care of this matter. Although Huberty had repeatedly shouted throughout his shooting spree that he had been a veteran of the Vietnam War, he had never actually served in any military branch. Initial reports issued by the San Diego Police Department following the massacre indicated Huberty had shot all injured or killed within the restaurant in the initial minutes after he had first entered the restaurant. This claim was disputed by survivors, who stated Huberty had shot both wounded and unwounded people over 40 minutes after he had first opened fire.
Focus with this police here in the border town of San Ysidro. Today, this is the only reminder of what happened on this spot, but the memories will haunt us forever. Let's go back to that night and Marty Levine.
Shortly before 4 o'clock this afternoon, 41-year-old James Huberty walked into the McDonald's in the 400 block of West San Ysidro Boulevard in San Ysidro. He yelled the word freeze, and then he opened fire. The terror, the tragedy, the madness which followed can really not be described. When all the shooting was over, after a member of the police SWAT team had shot and killed Huberty, 21 people were dead. Many others were injured. Many of them remain in the hospital. It was the worst multiple murder by one gunman in the history of this country.
The death toll started at 6, then 10, 20, and climbing. By 4:15, a virtual army of police and rescue personnel had crowded the main street through this border town. Suddenly, a shot was fired. Police radio screamed, "He's down, he's down, the suspect's down." James Huberty had fallen to a SWAT sharpshooter's bullet. One single bullet killed a man who had apparently systematically fired, loaded, and reloaded his weapon to kill all those people. It all happened in about an hour. No one can explain why.
It's a very, very sad thing, and such a waste of human life that you just cannot comprehend it. It doesn't look real.
There is only one sure fact. The man was charged, convicted, sentenced, and executed by the split-second thunder of a police sharpshooter's bullet. That image, too, will echo through this neighborhood. Young people gathered in the parking lot talking about their friends, what somebody had heard, rumors. For some, the ending was happy. Maria Imelda Diaz and her 2-year-old boy, Fuet, had been inside McDonald's when the shooting started. Mrs. Diaz got outside right away. Her son did not. She saw him inside, against the window, crying.
And she waved at the little boy to come out, So the little boy came out, pushed the door and came out. That's when she grabbed him and just stayed there until, they got him.
The boy got out safely. He and his mother went to the substation to be united with their anxious family.
Talking to us at a secret location, Effie Huberty built a profile of her husband as a man who himself was hurt. She said after losing his last job, his sane periods were few and far between. But he realized he was having problems, and just 2 days before the shooting spree, sought psychiatric help.
I think he called. I heard him talking to someone about it on the phone, and then he came out in the kitchen. He told me that they would call him with an appointment. And he sat in a chair with the phone beside him, waiting, and no one ever called back.
2 months later, the McDonald's restaurant was stripped of its contents, the building demolished, and the land leveled. But the horror of San Ysidro would not be erased, and the question why never answered. The person whose camera recorded so much of the emotion is Scott Hall, too young to know the experiences of military combat, but permanently affected by what he saw at San Ysidro.
It was my first assignment on something like this. All I saw was black and white. On our camera, the monitor you see is black and white. You don't get the real feeling of being there in person. I don't anyway. because I'm seeing everything through the camera. It was later that I did have some real serious problems, some very strong memories of all the bodies we saw lying on the floor, of all the people rushing out, crying, screaming, just frantic. And it was a couple of days after it really happened that I finally felt the whole impact of the thing, that I started feeling guilt, and some guilt, more so anger as to why he would do all that.
The bullet that was supposed to hit my heart hit her hand.
She was just 4 months old when a man with a gun and a mission to kill shot her in the head. But little baby Carla survived that horrific McDonald's massacre where 21 others died. And tonight, many years later, she's back here in San Diego to share her story, soon to be told in a documentary. And our 10 News anchor, Itika Milana, shows us the series of events that saved baby Carla.
Yeah, that McDonald's was torn down and it was replaced with this college. Carla Felix was just an infant and she doesn't remember that day, but she carries the horror with her every day.
My mom was holding me when we got out of the car, was when he shot us.
1984, Carla Felix and her parents had just pulled into the McDonald's in San Ysidro.
Who thinks that you're gonna go to McDonald's and get shot?
James Huberty, 41, and a father himself, shot everyone in sight, even this 4-month-old baby.
The bullet that was supposed to hit my heart hit her hand.
But the bullets kept coming. Her mother shot in the eye.
My mom and I have the same scar in our stomach. And then I have a few in my back. I have half a bullet still in my head.
Carla's father pushed through his injury, grabbed his baby, and handed her to a complete stranger.
The stranger then handed it to a policeman, and they both rushed it to the hospital.
This is a picture of a nurse caring for baby Carla.
Anniversary every July 18th. I go back and I look at the videos, and it's hard to believe I was involved.
No memory of what happened to her, but the scars still with her, emotionally and physically.
I do believe I'm a miracle child. Like, for a 4-month-old to get shot and survive is crazy.
Wendy Flanagan had never spoken publicly about surviving the McDonald's massacre 32 years ago in San Ysidro. She was 17 and working a register when she went to the back to get more ice because they had run out.
I thought it was possibly a firecracker that somebody, as a joke, threw. You know, it was right after the 4th of July, so I assumed that's what I heard so loud. I didn't know until he started shooting. My friend next to me, she had gold chains on her neck with crosses, and the Virgen of Guadalupe she had on her neck, so we held them and we prayed.
After more than an hour of praying and hoping for the best, Huberty was shot by a sniper, and Flanagan ran to safety. That's a picture of her with her hand on her. Long ago, the McDonald's restaurant was demolished. It was turned into a Southwestern College satellite campus. There's also a memorial on the site. Every anniversary, fresh flowers are placed on it. You'll also find a plaque with the names of all the victims. There is absolutely no mention of James Huberty, the shooter, here or in the documentary.
If the media kept the killer's name out of the media, there'd be less murders in our country.
I looked over and I saw McDonald uniform, and then I'm assuming that was Maggie, where she fell and got shot a bunch of times there, and that was the worst part of everything, is seeing her. I'll never forget what she looked like.